This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host of the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And there are some guests that I invite on who I need you to know about. And it is literally that word, need you all to know about, because I've known this individual for coming up to best part of 15 years, I think it is. I think we were introduced at the beginning of 2011.
Yeah.
And I've worked alongside her. I've learned from her. I class her as a really close friend. She's part of my women in recruitment leadership community. She's somebody that I hold very dear, and I need you all to understand why that is. So, without further ado, she sat there cringing at the moment. This is Kerri-Ann Hargreaves, who is the founder of Consult KA and has been in the recruitment industry for just short of 20 years as we record this in 2025. Can you believe it? Welcome to you today, Kerri-Ann. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, thank you. It's nice and sunny outside, so I have to say that lifts the mood, doesn't it? But yeah, no, I'm good.
Totally agree. And if you're listening to this from outside the UK, you have to understand this is a rare thing for us to experience. It just we us Brits love talking about it. I spoke to a client this morning before I started podcast day, and we just both said it just makes everything seem nicer and kinder and better.
It
Even when you're
does,
having a rubbish day when the sun's shining, it's like, oh well, you can just
definitely.
brush it
I
off.
feel like it's one of those things where you can just go and grab a coffee outside and
Mm,
you can actually, for people who work in an office, because I now 100% work from home, which is a complete change for
mm.
me, but I can go grab my lunch in the garden. I'm actually taking a lunch break because the weather is so
Yeah,
nice.
makes you get
I'm
out,
walking the
doesn't it?
dog. It makes you get out.
Mm.
And I think when I was in Manchester the other week meeting you, obviously for the Women in Recruitment Leadership Day that we did, just wandering around Manchester because the sun
Mm.
was shining. I don't think I usually see so many people outside taking a break. And,
No.
we're talking about recruitment today and business. And recruitment is one of those industries, isn't it, where people don't take a break. They're
Mm.
scared to move away
Yeah.
from the desk. And do you know
Mm.
what was amazing is that's what I saw. Everyone sitting out,
No.
chatting, even if they're just
No.
taking 15, 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Well, it
Yeah,
just the thing is when we have a very long winter in this country, and you have to. I mean, if there's anyone else listening that is a fellow forced 5 a.m. club, because that's the only time I can get up and get to the gym without the phone ringing. It's not as nice when it's dark and wet and rainy outside as it is when it's the birds are tweeting and the sun's up from 4:45 at the moment. So I'm
yeah.
I'm a very circadian rhythm kind of girl. So yeah, no, I think hopefully the conversation today will continue to bring sunshine wherever you're listening and whatever time you're listening and whatever the weather's doing, because who knows how long it'll last. So I know who you are and what you do, but just give us an introduction as to what Kerri-Ann Hargreaves business stands for and what Consult KA does.
Yes. So I guess what I stand for really is, well, it's in the name of the business, really, consulting. I think it's kind of one of the things that struck me right at the start of my recruitment career. I worked with a director way back then that's what she really pushed on us is that if you're gonna win business and if you're gonna build relationships, because without that you don't have a career in recruitment, no matter what anyone tells you, if you have no relationship, you have no business.
Yep.
It's that simple. And that's what Consult K is about. It's about relationships, it's about consulting through the process. So whether that's like a job seeker, someone that's just thinking, I want to make a change, or whether that's a business, it's about guiding someone through a process. And what am I all about? Well, I think one of my original strap lines, and you'll remember this, was about putting the human approach back into recruitment because I think it went.
Mm.
And so many businesses were focused on KPIs, were
Yep.
focused on hitting a target, and too many recruiters these days still are. And it was about really bringing that human connection, that human touch back into a process. Um, and I think just about adding some value along the way. And I know
Mm.
we're going to talk about that all the way through anyway, but
It's going to be a
yeah, so
golden thread. And for me, I think all the things that you have always stood for, even, bringing in that example of the human touch, you've always been a little bit ahead of the curve with that, I think, because that's where we're at now. And I do try and create episodes that you could listen to, as an evergreen. But the reality is
yeah,
we are in this fast forward evolution now. And I think the one thing that will cement every leader listening is that what will make you survive the evolution
yeah.
is that human connection. And you've always been talking about it. So I can't wait
Mhm.
to get down and dirty. You've not said what sector you do. Let's just talk about your industry and your
Oh,
market.
right, okay. So I'd say that through and through, I'm predominantly finance. For the majority of my career, I've always recruited finance professionals. In the pandemic, I
Mm.
pivoted slightly
Yep.
because so many of my human resource contacts, obviously in recruitment, that's a lot
Mm.
of the time who you're building relationships with.
Mm.
They asked me to help them. So then business, it kind of then transferred. So I've tagged in human resources, but I'm professional services recruiter. That's me through and through. But
Yeah.
finances, it's my baby.
Bread
I
and
started in
butter.
finance. So I was a credit controller back in 2001, was it? I think it was. Yeah, I was 21.
Wow.
Started in finance as a credit controller, and a recruitment business got hold of me as a credit controller because I was being made redundant and said, "You'll make a great
Make a
recruiter
great.
for
Well, they were right.
finance."
They were
So
right. They were absolutely right. So you didn't quite fall in, you were pulled in.
I was pulled in, yeah,
I
definitely.
love
But then I
that.
think I fell hook, line, and sinker. I
Yeah.
think it was literally a recruiter that thought, I just like you, and I've put you in a credit control job. You're being made redundant. Just come and sit in the sales office. And
Yeah.
what was it? Teacher said to me, primary school teacher, I think, and I'll make this a LinkedIn post actually. There's an idea for you, anyone. Think about things back in the past. She said to me, you're going to be in sales because you're a chatterbox.
Right. I
That's
got
what she
called.
said.
I always think the labels you get called as a child have a way of weaving their way through your own psyche. And I
Mm.
went through an experience, this is a total digression, but when I was going through my second divorce, I did the Women Everywhere. It's the
Oh,
manifesto.
right, yeah.
Gillian Anderson book. And one of the things it gets you to do is write down the labels that you got called as a kid. And then you
Wow.
decide in this exercise, do this now, everybody. Write down on a piece of paper. So you split it into two columns. First column, write down all the labels that you got labeled, not through choice, as a child that really stuck out to you. And then on the second column, you decide which labels you want to keep and which ones you're
Ooh.
going to rename. So I always got called bossy, chatterbox, loud, outgoing, extrovert, and all these, let's face it now, leadership style qualities
Yeah, yeah,
that we
definitely.
were. So, and I think that the chatterbox one, I remember somebody introducing me. This was like in my late 30s. Somebody introduced me in a social context as a chatterbox, and I remember feeling really offended. And the reason it offended
Yeah,
me as an older person was that actually that implies, I think the implication as chatterbox is that you don't listen. And I think that's a total contradiction to actually who I know you to be and who I know myself to be, which is, yes, of
yeah,
course, we are. I think we're eloquent. I think people enjoy, clearly, you're listening to this podcast now because you like listening, but I listen twice as much as I speak. And I think the chatterbox label was the one that I couldn't wait to get rid of the most. Bossy, it probably was right while I was growing up because my little sister at the time, I only had one sister at the time, she acquiesced to every single thing that I told her to do. So hence, I just absolutely went for it. Anyway, total digression there. Now you and I think we need to give context to everybody that we were introduced through the most incredible other Mrs. H, because we were all Mrs. H's. I'm the only one that's no longer a Mrs. I'm a
yeah.
Ms, but you're both still happily married, I hope, both of you.
We are.
Lovely, amazing Joanne Hood. And she knew of you. She was working with me at Key Recruitment Northwest at the time. And you joined as a franchise business partner for Key Recruitment's Midlands.
Yes.
And to this day, in the short time you were with me, I learned so much from the OG of Instagram and social selling. And that's one of the reasons I needed you to come back on because I think social selling has become a bit like EVP, a bit like, all these fractional, all these
Absolutely.
terms that we tend to throw around. But you've lived and breathed it now for the best part of where we've had social media. You were the OG. So
Absolutely.
what
Yeah.
I want to talk about the evolution of social selling. So you can talk about you had your own social media business where
Yeah.
which that was incredible, and then talk about where I want you take us on a journey of where you think that can be utilized now in recruitment.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that original selling to me, it started actually on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I don't use that platform anymore because I think I
No.
stopped enjoying it about 5 years ago, if I'm honest. And
Yeah.
obviously the platform's hugely changed. And what is it now? X, I think
X.
it is. But
Yeah.
Twitter for me was where to be fair, it sounds really cheesy now, but that 5 a.m. club, because I've always been an early bird, I've always enjoyed getting up early, but there was a whole collection of us. And I think I built that network from networking, but equally on LinkedIn as well. And then that transferred into Instagram because, yeah, like you're saying, I had built up quite a big personal following from being a parent and sharing our lives basically as a family. But then it gave me the idea that I needed to fling that over into my professional career. And so LinkedIn is kind of where I would say my social selling is now, but I do use Instagram still,
Yep.
especially in the last few months. And I'm enjoying it, definitely. But I think the social selling piece is so important because you're showing who you are as people.
Mhm.
And I know that we'll get a few people that might say, yeah, but LinkedIn isn't Facebook. LinkedIn is whatever it needs to be to get you in
Yep.
front of your customers. It's that simple. And if that is sharing something that you've done as a on a weekend or an evening, what you're doing there is you're creating a connection. And that's what social selling's about, is adding value, creating a connection, kind of empowering the people around you to do
Mm.
whatever that may be, whether I'm talking about business or talking about family or just being relatable. And I think that's the
Yeah.
thing, is being relatable. And
Yep.
but for me, I think it was such a natural progression. I'd have to have a look when I joined LinkedIn, but I'm sure I joined LinkedIn right at the start of
Mm.
probably 17, 18 years ago. And
Mm.
all I used it for then was posting a job and searching.
Yep. Yep.
That's all I used it for. And I
Mm.
don't think that changed until maybe, probably say it didn't change until even after you and I worked together at
Yeah.
Key,
Yeah.
because LinkedIn still wasn't
No,
used
it
for
wasn't.
what we use it for today. It was still just for searching people and chatting to people, making
Yeah,
connections. That was it. There
connections,
was
doing
no,
your research for
yeah, it was
companies and that kind of thing. I think COVID
yeah,
is when it changed, and that's when you did
100%.
Hoxo. It's when I did Hoxo. Big shout out to
Yeah,
Sean. I think
yeah,
I joined about 2007 because Facebook was around 2007, and the only reason I know that for definite is because that's when Lilia was born.
right,
And I remember
right,
being on
okay.
maternity leave with Lilia and a friend sending me a connection request. And I was like, what's this? Because at the time it was Friends Reunited. That's where anybody was.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyone,
yeah,
show my age. And I was like, oh, this looks fun. I think it was even still called The Facebook because that was its original
yeah,
name. And then, of course, you started to get invites for other social platforms. And then it was, oh, what's this LinkedIn? And at the time, it was very much IT. That was all IT people were on there. We were quite
yeah.
early to go on there, but it was just jobs. So when you
Well,
were with me 2011, we would have just been. To be fair, if we added somebody else into the conversation, Claire Lancaster,
well,
she came and
absolutely.
did white label social media and marketing stuff for the team. We were actually doing the stuff now back then that now would be seen as innovative. So we were doing it then. We were doing videos,
Yeah,
YouTube,
yeah.
video job descriptions, and actually, you were a really big part of that. So I think the evolution is that things almost go in full circles, but it's how you
Oh,
use it.
absolutely.
It's how
It's
you
how
use
you
it.
use it. Yeah, definitely. And I feel like even back in the day with LinkedIn, we were still using it, like you said, differently and still having a personality and a voice. And I think your branding is a huge part of that on LinkedIn.
Yep.
It all connects, the way you speak, your tone, but actually what you're delivering on
Yeah.
there. And I
Mm,
do feel like now all the social channels have merged. I think you can be the same person on all the
yeah. I
channels,
agree.
and actually, I think that's what people want to see. What they don't want to do is see one version of you on LinkedIn and
Agree.
another version of you on Instagram and Twitter, if that's what
That's
you're using.
really interesting that you've said that. And with all the conversations I think I've had this season, I don't think anyone's actually joined those dots. And that's a bit of a eureka moment for me because if I think to one of the reasons I know I'm well respected in what I do is that people have often said you just seem really authentic. And I've always jokingly said,
Yeah,
well, the person that you see in a business meeting will be exactly the same person that you'll see at the time I used to say things like in the play park or at the school gates.
yeah, yeah.
What you see is what you get. You won't get two different leashes at
Mm,
all. And I think what happens is that the level of due diligence that people do. So, if you're a job seeker or you're placing job seekers, which I guess most of you are that are listening, you're you're positioning yourself on LinkedIn as one thing. Your job seekers will be going and finding you on Instagram and TikTok. They will be because it's just what we do.
absolutely.
We all we
Do you know?
all go down rabbit holes. So if you're positioning yourself as I place
Mm,
I place lawyers or I place construction professionals, and then you're doing something totally different on Instagram, or you're talking about being a diversity and inclusion specialist on LinkedIn, and then you're sharing racist stuff over on Facebook, you're gonna get found out.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's, like this is it. I'm going to say something slightly off piece now, but you're talking about there about being authentically yourself. So I
Mm.
have this conversation all the time with job seekers because, and this was, gosh, this was 2012 or 2013. I had a client actually rescind a job offer because they went away and did some social proofing, and the state of the individual's Twitter account just meant that they couldn't hire him.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Mm.
that's definitely a rule. So be yourself,
Yeah.
but equally remember, especially if you're, say, if you're like a recruitment business that's thinking, I want to get my recruiters social selling, and every business should, in my opinion. You
Yeah.
might have different people that do it in different ways or
Mm.
at different levels of social selling. Make sure that they are true to themselves and true to your brand, because I think that's
Yeah.
really important. Like, you have to be authentically you, but you've got to be mindful of the
What
brand as a
of what
whole.
that you are genuine, and yeah, I find it really interesting that we've never talked about this before. But actually, let's flip it, because when you are a job seeker, what's the
Yeah.
first thing you're going to do, apart from going to your expert recruiter, of course, is you're going to go on Google reviews, you're going to go on Glassdoor,
Yeah.
and you're going to take that pretty much verbatim, which I always say, take it with a pinch of salt, but that's all the employer is actually doing on you. And this is why we're not going to go there about references, but this is why I've always believed that it should be two-way. You should be
Yeah.
allowed to go and speak to ex-employees as well if you're starting a job or somewhere. But that's, I guess that's for us to consult clients and customers on that. But I
Yeah.
think that social proofing is actually something that nobody has really taken into consideration on this podcast before. And I think
Mm.
it's something that we should all audit ourselves,
Oh,
and
100%.
set your make sure you've on your settings, you put your system preferences on Facebook and Instagram, that people
Yeah.
you have to give permission to be tagged, because if you are going out
Mhm.
on a big bender, you don't want to be seen having potential employees seeing that, if if
Yeah.
you don't want that to happen. And I think it's really important to curate your social media presence and your personal brand in the same way that you would present yourself if you were going on a pitch. It's exactly the same thing to me.
Absolutely. And I think going back to what you said there about, because I always say this with clients, is the person that you meet is the person that you'll be dealing with consistently. And
Yeah.
that's what you want in a recruitment process, but equally for all your candidates. I regularly share, I need to do it actually because we've just finished the football season, but I'll talk about George and his football. Like, George is my
Mm.
teenage boy. And then now I actually bump into clients and candidates on the football field because they
Yeah, they
recognise
recognize you.
and they feel confident to come over. And that's what you want, because that is a human connection. Speaking of Sean Anderson, I saw him in Manchester a few weeks ago with his family, and I actually didn't go over and speak to him because they were having a
Yeah,
meal and stuff.
yeah,
But that's that connection that you want, is that
yeah.
if you do see someone, you want to be approachable. So that's not just in life, in your profession,
Mm.
that's it's outside of work as well, because that is all about that, empowering people to actually step up and talk to you. That's what we want on LinkedIn, isn't it? Is that come and connect and talk, don't
Yeah.
just lurk in the background.
It's the
You know,
it's the pull, it's the attraction, and I think we're going through such transition as an industry, and I think recruiters who sit there and think that they almost are owed a living, that they're owed the jobs to be sent through to them, and they don't have to go and fight for it. Your days are numbered. They're gone if they're not already gone.
well,
Recruit,
Lysha, they
yeah,
should have been in
yeah,
recruitment in 2008
yeah,
or
exactly. We know.
2012 or
Yeah.
2006,
On
because,
that's now that this is now, and the thing
yeah,
is, this is the first real blip that we've had, because COVID didn't really happen. The blip didn't happen, and then of course we had that absurd surge of and
oh,
frenzy.
it's back.
But I
Mm,
think just making that point of people coming up to you in a football field, always be selling,
Yeah,
always be available to network. That is actually how you will build some of your strongest relationships. And getting out and about, you mentioned before about being out in Manchester or wherever you're based, wherever you're listening to this, wherever your clients could be, getting yourself out there, becoming
mm,
once a week, once a fortnight, being known that you're going to be out in that city or that space,
yeah, yeah,
and let's meet for a coffee, and people recognizing you. I mean, joking aside, we go into Manchester once a week, and 10 a penny, people will wave at us, and Shannon will just go, "You don't know who that is," and I'm like, "I have no idea," but they know who I am. They know who we are because
yeah,
it's a brand. People, we
yeah,
share
yeah.
so much of so much of our faces, but people know who we are, and of course, that what does that actually mean? Let's look at ROI. It means the next time they're looking to hire or the next time they're looking to move jobs,
Absolutely.
who's at the forefront of their mind?
So what I'd say is, like, don't get me wrong, um, social selling is not a replacement for picking up the phone because I think
Good.
picking up the phone is really important. However,
Yeah.
I think it adds a layer of
Mm,
connection, complexity, and well, you've already said the word authenticity,
mm.
and I can't think of the word, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm trying to think of the word. It adds a layer of just proving who you are and what you
Yeah.
are, and
Yeah.
I feel like if you're in a situation where you can demonstrate who you are, how good you are, but by just being yourself, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to be on
Agreed.
LinkedIn?
Yeah.
It's literally a reference for you. I have clients that will come to me purely for advice. They might not need to recruit with me at
Yeah.
that point in time, but they know from all the value that we put out on LinkedIn and other social media channels that I'm the go-to person for
Yeah.
if they've got a struggle with something or if they're benchmarking a role or actually they're not quite sure where this role fits within a structure because their business is so different to someone else's. And I'm out there in the market every day
Yeah.
to
So
make it.
you're in a position to do that, and I really want to focus on that because obviously your business is Consult. That is the name
Yeah,
of your business, the brand of your business. You were talking to me before we started recording about how that name came about. Let's just share that with
yeah.
the audience because I just think it's wonderful.
Well, literally, it was towards the back end of last year. Again, a couple of clients just needing me for a bit of advice before the end of the year, coming into new year, new structure. And two clients in 1 week rang me and said, "I'm ringing to consult K. I need your help." And I just thought, that's it. Like
Yeah.
that, that's the
It does
name.
what it says on the tin.
It does what it says on the tin, but if that's how my clients view me, and
Yeah.
equally, the more I talk to candidates and job seekers in their process, it's like, I always know that I can ring you and you're going to put my mind at ease or make me think about something different
Sure.
or in a different way. That's
Sure.
what consulting is. And it's a huge piece of recruitment that so many recruiters just don't value because it actually takes time, doesn't it, Lysha? It's not,
Yeah,
you can't
it
consult
was
in a 2 minute call.
no, and it was something that you said
Yeah,
right at the start, really, that I think, I'm very conscious that our listeners, that there is a cohort of our listeners who are very new in the industry and they've probably come in way post COVID. They might have even come in way post the bubble of 2022. And
yeah,
it's a tough market. And I think you're under pressure, you've got a revenue target, you've probably got, whether they're called activity targets, you will have some kind of measure on you, especially if you're in your early career, because the reality is
yeah.
it is going to be strength through numbers in your early days. That
Mhm.
is the truth. We've done it. We've earned the stripes. We've done the
It is, yeah.
ridiculous, hideous, 50, 100 calls a day, which I just find absurd these days. But there is a method in that madness of, if you speak to 50 candidates in a week, you are going to place a percentage of them, and you are
There
needing to
is,
speak
yeah.
to 50. I don't need to speak to 50 because I've been doing it for so long. But if you are new, so that should be a whole different podcast, really. But the reason I'm
Yeah,
going down this line is that it's balancing when you are trying to prove yourself to your leader that you are in it for the long haul, that actually consulting doesn't always result in something straight away. The ROI is very hard to measure when you are truly consulting because you're not
yeah.
asking for anything. You're
Mhm.
basically being that conduit and that expert, and you're possibly winging it as an expert in your early career, going, well, I've only been doing it 6 months, but I'll call myself an expert. But the
Yeah.
fact that they're trusting you, and it's actually, hold tight with that, because it's all of the things combined, isn't it? And I
Mm.
do I do really feel for people building their careers right now, because I think when we were doing it. And, not to say, make myself sound like a dinosaur, it wasn't as competitive. That's the reality. There's just so
It
much
wasn't.
competition. So I think nowadays you have to prove yourself a lot quicker. And therefore
Mm,
it's harder to build the longer term relationships. And people probably roll their eyes at all this sort of advice, but hang tight. And if you're in the right organization that recognizes that, you probably need to get some quick wins, but
absolutely.
not at the risk of building longer term relationships. I think it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And if you don't do it, well, then you won't be there. You'll have no longevity in your career. So you've got, I think there is a balance, you're right. And if you're working for a business that doesn't acknowledge that relationships are key, then maybe that isn't the right business to be in, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you
Agreed.
want to build a career. Like I remember one of the terms, you might laugh at this, hot boss. That was one of the terms that we had in recruitment, hot boss, and always trying to obviously work a layer above and a layer above. But I did that almost
Mm.
20 years ago.
Mm.
And one of my original clients, I'm still working with her today,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
because
Exactly.
I managed the process, I built the relationship. We know each other's families, we might, recruiters these days might never get to this, but I had clients at my wedding, and I still
Yeah.
speak to them today.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't work with a couple of them today, but we still speak as
Mhm.
peers, as mentors to
Yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
because it's really important. And the job of a recruiter is actually taking in so much around them. It's going on in the market.
Yeah.
It's not just about recruiting for that one client on that one day, is it?
No.
It's actually being this person for a
Yeah.
business.
It is. It's basically being that you are that pinnacle for that company
Mm,
when they need you, and it's
yeah.
being that expert, being that sounding board a lot of the time. I mean,
Mm,
truly, go and Google in a Urban Dictionary or a real life dictionary what consult actually means, and to me, that should always be the North Star. It's
yeah.
actually not
Mm,
changed in the 26
yeah.
years I've been doing recruitment, and it's never been more important to consult. So I love that when I saw your brand when you obviously launched yourself, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, it's just for people that know you, it's a
It
no-brainer. But
works.
I think I don't know what you think. Get your crystal ball out, Kerri-Ann. But I think that for the, who knows in 10 years, but let's even say the next 5 years, I think we will see the market grow and shrink. And I think it will
Mm,
grow again and then shrink again. And it'll be, lots of companies trying to outperform each other, spending loads of money on AI that's still unproven. Um,
yeah.
and then there'll be companies that I think will utilize tech effectively and properly
Mm.
to basically streamline the bits you can't consult on. That's it
I
for me.
would,
Simple as
yeah.
that.
And I would say the businesses that are utilizing tech to streamline processes are the businesses that are already leading and the businesses that
Yeah.
will still be here in 5 years, in 10 years. I use tech to help me. I'm independent, I'm solo, so I
Yep.
have to because
Yep.
I can't be everything all
Nope.
the time.
Nope.
But I don't use AI for everything. And
Nope.
and I think that's really important, that human connection, that human approach. There's nothing replaces picking up the phone and speaking to people or meeting people.
Absolutely.
I make sure I'm getting out once or twice a week
Love it.
so that I'm actually in front of the people I'm working with. And going back, I'm going to go back one sec 'cause I meant to say this, but you were talking earlier about how, we ask our job seekers to do the research on the businesses that they're interviewing with. Well, candidates do the research on you as well as individuals, as recruiters, which is why you need to be
Yeah.
authentic. And more so these
Definitely.
days, because I think individuals are frightened, because I feel like it's just recruitment, but I do get some spam messages on WhatsApp and
Oh,
text from,
yes.
yeah. So
Oh.
I had a candidate question me the other week because he was worried that I might have been spam and that I was this mythical person and actually it wasn't real. And
Hmm.
so I guided him. I was like, right, well, go to this place, go
Yeah.
to this place, go to my website, look at me as a whole, and you will see me and work, me and life, me and business.
That's because you've got to. I genuinely think this that when you have a professional photo done, and then you go and look at the ones that are the bots, and I get added all the time. All the time I get emails. All the time I get the WhatsApp thing really annoys me.
Yeah.
It's
Mm,
like they try and ring you and then it's a message and then you just think, well, you're just not real, are you? It's a
yeah.
phishing basically. And I
Mm,
know there's now a massive issue with data breaches and you know,
yeah.
these cyber hacks of people, going into databases and stuff. I think it's going to become
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bigger problem. I think
It is. Yeah.
we'll see. I think we'll see, data and cyber managers within big recruitment companies becoming a real niche. Um, but and that's sometimes I switch my profile picture back to one that is selfie with the branding around it, so I look real again. But I think that again,
Yeah.
that's right. Getting endorsements up to date, using video, use video brilliantly. And of course, we know that there's so much, the AI fake stuff. We know that that's just going to become
Mm,
more and more prevalent. But just use your brain, and
absolutely.
I go down the rabbit holes like everyone does. I allow myself once a week to do an hour of down the rabbit hole of looking at all these AI videos, and they're just fun. The one I love the ones where it's what we looked like 100 years ago in certain cities, and then what we're going to look like. And I'm like, well, it's all nonsense, and it's just
It
really
is.
funny. Like, that's not what it'll be like. So I think that we can all talk ourselves into it, but I think what you've said today just kind of really, I think, brings home the real life of running a solo
Mm,
business, or whether you're listening to this, we've talked to those who are in recruitment jobs where you are effectively running a solo business within a business.
of
That's
course
what
you
your
are.
desk is.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think it's been really solid advice for people. So, we've got so much respect for founders like yourself, Kerri-Ann, because you put yourself out there, you're brave enough to go and do it. And have you got any last words of advice for whether it's leaders, future founders, or for those starting their recruitment career?
Gosh, I think for future founders, for leaders, just be brave. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. If ever there is a time in recruitment, it's now. It was actually 5 years ago, but it's now. If you're not prepared to do it, I think you've got to be mindful that you're going to be behind the people that are, and
Yeah.
they'll be the people that are in front of your
Mhm.
customers. That's the reality. I feel confident that I'm in front of my customers. Every candidate knows that if they need some help with their job search, they
Yeah.
go to my LinkedIn profile. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And that's what you want for your team, for you as individuals. If you're setting out in recruitment, add some value to every candidate. My thing with every candidate that I speak to, every job seeker that I speak to, is that they have to leave the phone call, whether I will be able to help them or not in the future. They leave that phone call
Yeah.
with advice from me, whether
Love
that's
it.
as simple as adapt your CV to read like this because it's not going to get through a system, or a recruiter isn't going to pick it up if you haven't got this in it. Um, Adapt your interview process because you've waffled a bit, you've gone into too much detail here. You
Yeah.
need to hone in your answer. You've got to give them something, like let them come off that phone
Definitely.
and go, she was bloody brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to recommend her to my friend,
Absolutely.
you
Always
know.
pay it forward is what you're saying. And I think signposting people when you can't help them, you've
Yeah,
no idea what that impact will actually have on their life. And
mm,
what we do is life changing. And that
absolutely.
one piece of advice could be the transformative bit. And I always say that because I don't do much with entry level, but occasionally I do make an exception, usually if it's a personal recommendation of a client or a
Yeah,
friend. And I always set the expectation and say, whatever happens, you're going to learn something from this process. But that is absolute gold. I've loved having you back on, and I love you being in the community, and you know how much I feel for you. You're an amazing lady. So people will be able to connect to you over on LinkedIn, start following all your videos and stuff. And have you've got Instagram page and everything?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
the Instagram is there. I'm really working hard on that at the moment to kind of add some me as well as, obviously my curated content. But Lysha, you're complimenting me and you've been a powerhouse for me. You've been a huge mentor. Gosh, we've been working together and helping each other since 2011, really, haven't we? Like
Yeah.
it's amazing that we're still talking. And that's the last thing to anyone in recruitment. Do not be afraid of talking to your peers. They're the
Yeah.
best people to
Yeah,
speak
they
to.
are. They are.
And
They
I probably
really are.
only learned that in the last 5 years from when I joined Hoxo, actually. I created a group of people doing it like I was. And so
Yeah.
don't be afraid.
Surround
Like,
yourself with like-minded people. We're not saying create an echo chamber, but I think if you
no,
gravitate towards people that have a similar mindset, I think you always feel less alone when things get tough. One final question, actually. Are you bringing back Recruitment Room 101?
no, it's on the list. I need to.
Please.
I loved
I
that
love
series.
that.
That was
That
definitely
was
my pandemic thing, wasn't it?
It was,
Yeah.
but it was, if anyone's listening now and going, what the hell's Room 101? It's a George Orwell 1984, where things went in Room 101 and never came out, basically. You banished things in
Yes.
there. And in the pandemic, Kerri-Ann had a podcast and YouTube channel which was dedicated to recruitment leaders and people
Yeah.
like myself, where we were allowed to bring three things.
Three things. Yeah,
Three
you're right.
things. And there is a TV show from I think the noughties
Yeah, there is. That's where
that
it came from.
similar
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah, yeah.
it was such a brilliant concept for a podcast. I don't think anyone's taken your crown. You
We
need
need
to
to
get
do
it
it, don't
back
I? Yeah.
because
And what's
let's
fun?
start making a list now.
Yeah, I know. And what's fun is that I work in a co-working space now that have a brilliant podcasting
Well, there you
room
go.
with all the tech.
Make it
So I could
happen.
even, yes, I do. I
Watch
feel
this
like,
space.
yeah, watch this space because it was fun, wasn't it? It
It
was
was
fun.
so. I remember saying to you at the time, like, can I only have three?
You did, I remember.
Recruiters. I need more than three. So I think you should 100% get it back. And thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.